is Let's Talk, radical radio getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. This On-the-Air Community Forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492 or tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR.
Don't do that. No. I forgot to bring the tweet box today, so there you go.
No tweeting allowed, but I'm fine with that. Mary, please.
Yes, your hosts today are Paul Raffel, leading the conversation and answering the phones. Charles Schultz, joining us as a guest marvelous host, and I'm Mary Frank.
And when you call in and hear the phone ringing, just hang on. You'll hear a weird little noise as I plug you into the system. And then when I say you're on the air, you will be on the air. Give me your name and turn down your radio, and please watch your language.
Today we're talking about the Electoral College. We'd love for you to join our conversation by calling us on 415-663-8492. And I would say, this is Charles Banquo Schultz, the ghost of the feast in West Marin since 2010, and I personally am not mourning Lady Macbeth's demise, so in the interest of balance, there you go. Well, what about the Electoral College? And Mary, you've got lots of things to say about this, yes?
Well, after last week's show where we touched on it a bit, and there was discussion that the reason that it came into being was to give the farmers a voice equal to the people in the city. But as I was digging deeper, a much more interesting fact arrived, which is that great populist Alexander Hamilton presented this, and it was passed because it was a way of evening out the disevenness of after the Civil War, when the slaves moved north and had a vote, the southern slaves didn't, and so the Electoral College was a way of balancing the imbalance of slaves who voted in the north.
Slaves could vote?
Free men in the North, but universal male suffrage in the United States not till 1856, which I thought was very interesting, although you get a big rise in the 1820s and 30s with Andrew Jackson, an exponential rise, actually, between, in the election of 1820, there were 108,000 ballots cast, and by 1840, there were 2.4 million. So universal male suffrage, the oppressed men, took till 1856, and of course, full voting rights, full universal suffrage, not till 1965, according at least to this history, in the sense that blacks, especially in the South, disenfranchised from the end of Reconstruction through Jim Crow right up to Johnson's landmark Voting Rights Act. So.
Right. Well, so you're saying that the Electoral College was founded on the slave industry. Wasn't the entire country founded on the slave system?
Yes, this is just one other beautiful caveat to it.
One of the little things that carries on.
Yeah, and to give you an idea about how the imbalance of representation, it takes 705,454 Californians to equal one electoral vote, and it takes 194,717 Wyomings to have one electoral vote. So there's a big imbalance there. As you know from last week, I never understood, I understood, but I never advocated that why isn't the popular vote? And we do that the way we elect our governors, and why don't we elect the governor of the governors, the president, in the same way?
Well, the Senate was used in this way by people like Madison who feared mob rule. So Wyoming gets two senators that represent 200,000 people apiece, so they represent collectively all 400,000 people in Wyoming, and we have two senators that represent, in theory, 20 million people each, or 40 million people collectively. But this is a way to prevent mob rule, to prevent, that kind of democracy. And it should be pointed out, this was founded as a constitutional republic. It was, based on all of these, arguments coming from Montesquieu about the balance of powers between these different branches of the government. And I think in our mind, we've always thought of one man, one vote, which of course was never in the Constitution. Right. We've thought of this as being a sort of democracy, even a direct democracy, which it just never has been. And I think what we're really talking about today is Hillary Clinton's won the popular vote, but she's lost in the Electoral College.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 663-8492, by the way. Sorry.
663-8492, 415-663-8492. Call in and give us your thoughts, opinions about the Electoral College. It's all a bit of a mystery to me still. You know, I'm not from your country.
Britain.
And it seems like a terribly convoluted way of doing things. Although, from what I've read, I mean, if there were not the Electoral College sort of system in which electors from each state cast their votes for the actual post of president, the actual presidential candidate. If it weren't that way, then we'd be, in some people's opinion, bogged down with recounts in every state because it would be the popular vote. The popular vote, for one thing, would take a long time to actually get it. They're still counting votes now.
120 million.
Although it's taken 2 years to get here, it seems like a week to count some votes would not be such a bad thing. But,
Well, a lot of votes don't get counted.
Right.
People are effectively disenfranchised in these elections. I think this is surprising. Not really. Well, there's some irony here, right? The whole thing was how dare Trump say he wouldn't accept the result, and of course, what's happened? The people who supported Hillary Clinton don't want to accept the result. So when their side loses, democracy is not served. When their side wins, democracy is successful.
Yeah,
interesting.
but I do hope that this galvanizes people to move toward a less archaic system, because I believe it should be popular vote. Listeners, we want to know what your opinion is. I don't think this is going to change the results of the election, but I think this has woken a lot of people up so that we could move to a popular vote, because it doesn't make any sense anymore not to.
663-8492 is the number to join this conversation here on KWMR.
So the other argument that I've seen is that, it does balance out the power of states. So now that we are basically a majority urban nation, the urban centers on each coast would be deciding the president, who's going to be president, and the Midwest would have no say. The rural states would have no say, or less say. I don't know. Is that a bad thing?
Clinton outspent Donald Trump 2-1. She spent double the amount of money than Donald Trump did. And the whole thing about the Electoral College is both of those campaigns now and for many decades have known about the Electoral College, and they campaign accordingly.
Sure.
So there is an argument that says that if Trump campaigned in California, which of course he did not do because he was never going to win it in the Electoral College, there may not have been a popular vote if he'd campaigned in New York and lots of other population areas that he knew he could not win electorally. Maybe the popular vote would have been much closer. If we had a system of popular vote and Donald Trump spent anywhere near the amount of money that Hillary Clinton spent to lose, maybe he would have won the popular vote there. So there are all these ideas about kind of little fixes we can do, and then that'll solve the problem. I don't think that's going to work. It's like term limits. So you have term limits because, politicians stay in office too long and they become corrupt. Well, then the lobbyists just run everything, and the politicians cycle in and out of, say, Sacramento, and the lobbyists who stay there full time have all of the power and all of the control. But the thought with that was, we can do this little fix, and then we're going to solve this big problem that we have in the political culture of the country, and it just never seems to happen that way.
Well, I'm going to go back to what you said also in our last show, that really where the power is locally, and I agree with that. And there's a part of me, the most skeptical part of me, that thinks, does it really make any difference who's president? I know it does, but I think it's less so than ever before, because who's really running the show? Obama had all kinds of great ideas. Could he get anything through? No. And we'll see if Trump can, we'll see.
Even worse than that, Mary, I'll give you just one example. For the first 2 years of Obama's presidency, he did have control. The Democrats did have control of the House and the Senate. And one of the things that happened then, John Conyers, the 25-term Democrat from Detroit, and another Republican, a Libertarian Republican from Michigan, they got together and had a bipartisan group that was going to propose real reforms to the Patriot Act and the National Defense, NDAA, I can't think of the name of it now, but these pieces of legislation that empowered national bureaucracies and the president to do all kinds of things that people think are illegal or unjust, et cetera, et cetera. They did pull together a real bill with real reforms in it, and at the last minute, Obama called on Nancy Pelosi to kill it, and she just barely got enough votes to kill that reform bill. So I think this has got to be a time for a kind of self-reflection. Who's the problem? Well, Nancy Pelosi live over there in St. Helena. You know, it's our neighbors, not people in Louisiana or Arkansas or something like that. But we forget all that history because mostly we don't want to know. I mean, the president is a symbol, like an idol, a god, and when the symbol is correct, we are all pretty happy to just ignore those kind of politics.
Well, it's interesting that both the candidates, Trump and Clinton, in the past have both said that it was their opinion that the Electoral College should be abolished. I think it was Trump himself who said it was a threat to democracy.
Yeah, that's how he feels now.
Right, now it's a good thing.
And now he thinks, it's a great system. And, of course, Hillary also said Electoral College should be abolished. I'm not sure when that was. I think that was actually back in, maybe it was when Bush got elected. I don't know. You know, sour grapes. Hey. And yet, it's still there. We got a lovely little email from Murray Seward.
Quickly, 663-8492. Yeah, Murray, you got to call in too.
415-663-8492. You can't call in.
He sent the email.
But as part of his email is, as for relying only on the popular vote, a problem arises as the majority of votes are found just in a handful of states. The trend has been for people to move from rural to urban areas. What if, say, 10 states had enough votes to determine the outcome? That could be problematical in many ways. For example, densely populated areas needing water might support legislation that would bring them water while degrading the environment, or maybe energy-hungry cities would favor burning coal, not caring about air quality. The current system gives weight, maybe too much weight, to less populated areas whose citizens may have important perspectives that would be ignored if we went to the popular vote. And he also says, as a city-oriented person in West Marin, I actually favor urban perspectives, is what he says. Thank you, Murray. The Electoral College. How many are there? There's 500...
535. I think it's the same number of people in Congress.
270, so it would be 538, I think. Is
538, extra 3 thrown in there or something. Maybe that's the whole number. This has been a long-term problem. And people like to say West Marin's in a bubble. It really isn't. The bubble is the illusion. I mean, the fact is places like coastal California, particularly Marin and West Marin, have been soaking up the wealth of the country and even the globe for decades, and things have been pretty nice here. And we really don't want to think about this in terms of some kind of self-criticism. All the people who live off portfolios of financial assets, those people are wired into the global economy. It isn't a bubble. It's just that we're bored with or distracted from any kind of real engagement with politics. And so something like this happens and everybody goes, ah!
Yeah, but that's a good thing.
But where have they been?
Well, that's life. When people go along and they do their life and they raise their kids and they do their daily life, and it's very easy to get not mesmerized, but you just get into that rhythm and your life is good, so you don't really think about that.
Sure.
But something like the good thing for me, anyway, about this election is that I think it's caused a lot. It's like that Shakti energy that is such a shock that precedes change. And
that's very genderized, Shakti.
Wait, don't we need that?
Well, no, actually,
we so need that.
Actually, I want to announce and let me say that I, for one, think that this Donald Trump election is a good thing, and there's going to be a big shakeup here at KWMR. So at noon today, there will be the Charles Hour with Charles. At 1 o'clock, it is Classical Thursday with Charles, which is now going to be called White Men's Greatest Hits. At 2 p.m., there'll be What is Charles Thinking Right Now? I will also be hosting that. At 3, Charles's random musings that I've written down, which will be read by Janet Robbins.
So old Charles all the time.
Exactly.
That's how that goes.
Look for it. If you have an issue with that, 663-8492 is the number.
And this is Let's Talk Radio with host Paul Raffel, Charles Schultz, and I'm Mary Frank. Please call us on 415-663-8492 and tell us your thoughts about the Electoral College. You can also, you can't tweet us. You can't tweet us, but
tweeting.
You can call today.
We're tweetless. So the actual date of the meeting of electors is December 19th. That's the date on which the
they're all going to get together
president is actually elected.
Fantastic.
And we have a caller. Caller, you are on the air. What's your name, please?
Oh, my name is David.
David, good
Hi, David.
morning.
Hello.
Good morning, David.
Well, Mary, you just started to touch on something which I firmly agree with, which is that when I looked at the map of how the country voted, and I haven't been able to find a county-by-county map. That would be really instructive because it would show the divisions within California and within all the other states. But in general, seeing the map of who won, who lost, what's red, what's blue, is quite a shock to me, and a good shock, because it just points up the divide that exists. You know, it really shows it in such stark clarity that I don't quite know what to do with it or about it. But it's obvious that the last 8 years. It's not just the last 8 years, but for a long time, we've been ignoring this gap, and the Republicans were kind of paying lip service to it by bringing up abortion and gay marriage every time, and then doing nothing else. And the Democrats have pretty much ignored a lot of those people. I don't exactly know to what extent it's really been ignored. I mean, the Democrats.
Well, I totally agree, but I think I mentioned this in the last show. There is an enormous amount of suffering going on really all over, aside from people who are doing very, very well. And it isn't just the last 8 years. Let's go back 30, let's go back 50 years, where, systematically, as the rights of the unions were diluted, as the jobs were taken out of this country, as there was less and less power for the people in the middle who were just working people trying to do the right thing, where health care was just off the charts and people were making a decision, do I get medicine, do we eat? That this problem has increased exponentially in the last several years, and it isn't just the Democrats that ignored it. Both parties ignored it. That's why this election was such a shock to so many, because you can't ignore that amount of suffering. I'm repeating myself from last show, but this is what happens when you ignore that. This is fertile ground for this kind of consciousness to have power.
Yeah, and it's also fertile ground for something new.
Yeah.
To change that. And if the Democrats want to get back into power, what they need to do is pay strong attention to what just happened. Now, 8 years ago, when Obama was first elected, and then 4 years ago when he was elected for the second term, the Republicans said to themselves long and loud, "Oh gosh, excuse me, this election shows us that there's all this constituency, that's right, that we haven't been paying attention to, which is the Hispanics and, certain aspects, certain parts of the culture. And now it's the Democrats' turn to do that and procrastinate if they want to or not.
Yeah, it does go back decades, and I think this is an opportunity not to cast blame, which is what is sort of the first thing, this rage, this, as I am fond of saying, quoting, this plague of sighing and grief that I see arise. See people crying, talk to people who cry, which is about rage and resentment. Oh, no, it was you, Mary. You cried. That's all right.
Oh, come on.
So that's one attitude, which is, oh, how disgusting these other people are, which is really, to me, an expression of resentment. How dare the rest of the country, break up our daydream here in West Marin. And the other side of it would be just some kind of Christian, oh, we're sinful, we're terrible. When I say this is a time for self-criticism, what I really mean is just reflection on how we got here. And too often we think of history as playing out just as it must. It's determined. It's like your genes, and there's a lot of sort of deterministic thinking in our culture. But no, we got to this situation because of decisions people made over a very long period of time, but we can take a different tack. We can go in a different direction. It'll require us thinking about how we got here.
And it's also decisions that were made for other people who felt they didn't have any power to make it or had dropped out. You know, when you don't see a connection between hard work and reward, it's like, so what? You know, and there's a lot of that going on as well.
And I am going to slide for now, but keep it up.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you so much, David.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
So 663-8492 is the number. Please do give us a call here on KWMR. Let's talk. We're talking about the Electoral College, but we're really getting all over the map on the
Yes, let's get back to the college.
They're all trying to get back to college, you know. All these.
Well, you know, I was wondering, you know, there's a lot of talk now about California. This is now a little ancillary topic about California seceding. Have you heard that?
Oh, sure.
You know, it's like, you know, we are the 5th biggest economy, not in the country, in the world. We have a bigger economy than both England and France.
Take that.
Yeah, so that's like, I mean, that's, you know, when you say in a bubble, part of it is what California has done is that we've done very well in growing the economy. We've raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We've done all of this progressive stuff, but I think instead of seceding, we should lead, because we have put into practice many of the things that will move the country in a good direction, and we have an opportunity to lead by example.
Well, so how about the Electoral College? What should California do about the Electoral College?
Well, I'm personally prejudiced about this, so I think they should still do why is somebody's vote more important than somebody else's vote? You know, that's really what it comes down to with me, and it's a very personal opinion. But I don't care where you live, you're no more important than I am, or I'm no more important than you are. And that's why I'm going with the popular vote.
Fair enough.
You know?
It's going to take a lot to repeal, but I think California needs to, if anything, on a local level especially, economically secede. This political secession isn't very meaningful to me, but if we can start producing the things that we consume locally, then we're getting ourselves out of this world in which there's always a new fight over a new pipeline. There's this catastrophe, thank you, Jerry Merrill, of the Delta tunnels to support mega corporate ag in the San Joaquin Valley. There's all this. If we can get away from our need for the products that come out of the ground in those places as a part of those networks, then the power that those corporations have begins to recede.
Yeah, and even on a national level, if people voted with their dollars, that's a lot of power. If we completely ignored the companies that are killing the country, or the world, really, that will have impact, because nothing will get their attention better than losing money.
Well, it comes back to our own backyard. We have to be willing to deal with this on a local level. So what you get out here is a kind of environmentalism typified by Jerry Merrill that says Delta tunnels, ecological disaster in Central California, fine. But here in West Marin, you know, you've got a little dairy over there. We've got to get rid of that dairy. That's a bad thing. So this insane children who are allowed to sort of dominate our society are extremely destructive. And so if we're going to be localists, that means being able to think about how we actually survive economically in our local environment, not environmental degradation over there, our little fantasy pastoral here in West Marin. That's all about the Electoral College. I don't see how you could say how distracted.
We're staying completely on topic.
Indeed.
There are 2 states, I guess, who, let's see, they give electoral votes for president to the winner of the national popular vote. One is Maryland. What's the other one? Nebraska? No, I had it somewhere. I can't find it now. Anyway, there are 2.
Wyoming? I don't know.
Maybe,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so they award their electoral votes to the winner of the national popular vote, rather than. So, for instance, in California, which has 55 currently, 55 electors. How would it be if we kept the electoral system, because it's going to take a constitutional amendment to get rid of it, and years to do it. But how about if California went with proportionate electoral votes, proportionate to the actual vote in the state? Here,
well, I want to read something, because I hope that this is enough to get people fired up to get rid of it. If the systems, this is going back in history now, if the system's pro-slavery tilt was not overwhelmingly obvious when the Constitution was ratified, it quickly became so. For 32 of the Constitution's first 36 years, a white slaveholding Virginian occupied the presidency. Southerner Thomas Jefferson, for example, won the election of 1800 to 01 against Northerner John Adams in a race where the slavery skew of the Electoral College was the decisive margin margin of victory. That alone is enough reason to get rid of it. And without the extra Electoral College votes generated by slavery, the mostly southern states that supported Jefferson would not have sufficed to give him a majority. As pointed observers remarked at the time, Thomas Jefferson metaphorically rode into the executive mansion on the backs of slaves. That alone is enough reason for me to get rid of it. What do we need as archaic system?
I'm not sure this is true, but weren't all, if not most, of the founding fathers, weren't they all slave owners anyway? You're talking about the formation of this country on the backs of slaves.
But some of them woke up, and there was the war, and, things did start to get better. So, yes, I mean, we're the bad guys. I'm always, no one talks about that, but look at the wars. You could say one thing about Trump, he doesn't have blood on his hands in the same way that Hillary Clinton does. So nobody's squeaky clean here, fellas.
Well,
nobody. But the point is, we can move forward.
It's a weird contradiction. I mean, you almost think of the federal government as kind of forces of nature. I mean, it would be glib to say it doesn't matter who the president is. I think it is sort of terrifying that Donald Trump is the president.
Yeah.
Very, very terrifying. We'll see how bad that gets. On the other hand, there are all these wonderful ironies in there, too, which is people care now. And as I said last week, torture and bombing and all these things in war, those used to be issues that Democrats cared about. When Obama was president, they were happy to forget about them. Mm-hmm. And so now they're not going to forget. And Donald Trump will be very easy to resist. And the people that he's going to appoint and the policy he's going to be pursued will get people out in the street and motivated. And we'll see how short a period of time 4 years really is. The real question becomes, what are we going to do differently? Mm-hmm. Are we just going to wait for another patriarch, it was daddy, and we're going to have mommy, and that was supposed to be an improvement, but it's still, we approach politics as children who want to have their lives managed for them, and we just show up and do work and have our play dates, and that's life. That is the infantilized world we live in, where we're just little kids.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's gotten worse in that way, as things have gotten more comfortable and more entitled.
Everybody plays video games.
Yeah.
Maybe not in West Marin, but see, poor people watch TV. West Marin is TV. So we
call in, won't you, West Marin?
Yes.
We love you.
Yes, this is KWMR Community. I'm going to get a little plug in here, guys. For West Marin, 90.5 in Point Reyes Station, 89.9 in Bolinas, 92.3 in the San Geronimo Valley, and streaming live on kwmr.org.
Call 415-663-8492. And, yes, we're talking about the Electoral College, which is a wonderful thing. But let me first say that KWMR is supported by College of Marin, offering 62 associate degrees, 54 certificate programs to prepare for in-demand Bay Area careers, as well as new degrees for students wanting to transfer to a UC or to a state university, financial aid and free tutoring, and other programs available. Classes start January 21st. Registration online at marin.edu. And KWMR is supported by Ken's Carpets and Flooring. Family owned and operated, Ken's Carpets has been supplying Marin County with natural wool, carpet, and hardwood since 2002. Ken's Carpets and Flooring is located at 1914 4th Street on the Miracle Mile in San Rafael and online at kenscarpets.com. Also, KWMR is supported by Osmosis Day Spa Sanctuary, offering massages, organic facials, and the Japanese cedar enzyme bath. Osmosis is located near the Sonoma coast, just up Highway 1, and features 5 acres of gardens as well as local and organic meals. The spa menu, online booking, and info about the surrounding area can be found at osmosis.com.
Enough of that, Rafael. We got a caller.
We have a caller. Hi, caller. You are on the air. What's your name, please?
My name is Fred from Marshall.
Yes, Fred from Marshall. How do you do?
Oh, fine. I heard that Nancy Pelosi is going to introduce a bill to get rid of the Electoral College.
Well, Barbara Boxer already did that. Yeah, that's
Barbara Boxer did.
Yeah, but it's that would have to pass by a 2/3 majority and then be ratified by the state. So
yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't think it has much of a chance of passing.
No, I would agree.
Yeah.
To what extent, Fred, do you think Wells Fargo is responsible for Trump?
Well, I think that they're the culprit.
Excellent. I'm glad we're in agreement.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, caller, about the election?
The national erection?
Oh, that's...
the election.
Yes.
No, I don't have any thoughts about it. I think it's a travesty, but you got to live with
What about the Electoral College? Are you... would you like to see it go? Do you think it's a good system? I mean...
Well...
Would you agree with Boxer that it's time for it to go?
Yeah, I think it's time for it to go. Yeah, absolutely.
So then it would be one person, one
democracy. It was set up for nefarious reasons.
Yeah. Well, we've got used to thinking of it as a democracy, and it never was intended to be.
No, it never was designed to be. And in fact, for just this reason, I mean, again, one of the ironies of all this people being upset about the election, is essentially what they were trying to avoid, which is, people having such a loud voice. I guess that isn't ironic. They're actually opposed to it because they want Hillary to be the president because she won the popular vote. So there you go.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. But you knew that.
Well, we're all screwed.
No, this could be an opportunity. I think it could be an opportunity.
I like a lot of his principles, but I don't think he has the wherewithal to carry them through. Like I would like to see less government regulations, more local power, but unfortunately, I don't think that he's going to follow through with any of his promises.
Well, and we'll see what changes the Democratic Party are willing to make. I mean, you've got some movement around new leadership there at the DNC, but you also have, Chuck Schumer and trying to become the Senate Minority Leader and set up his own, becoming the leader of the Senate in 2018. And he is Mr. Wall Street. So I don't know that the Democratic Party are going to get it. But this has been 40 years of them being hollowed out by corporate money. I mean, and Mary's going to hit me, this is why Trump presidency is a good thing. These women are out of control.
I didn't say it was a good thing. I said it's an opportunity.
Oh, I see. I'm a battered male. I just want to say that. What happens is when we deindustrialize, you get fewer and fewer people in union jobs, and the contributions to the Democratic Party from the unions becomes less and less. And so actually this was a Californian, Tony Coelho, back in the 70s, who said, hey, guys, we don't need to leave all that business PAC money to the Republicans. We can take it, too. And what did the Democrats control for all those decades? So they controlled things like the Ways and Means Committee in the House, which sets tax law in the United States. And so what they were doing was replacing that union money with business money, and they were getting that business money by changing regulations to benefit the people that donated to the Democratic Party. At the same time, they're doing exactly what the Republicans are doing. Instead of saying they're against abortion, they say they're for it. Instead of saying they're against minorities, they're for them. Instead of they're against women, they're for women. But they're undermining the economic lives of all of those poor and weak people that they say that they're going to defend. And they got away with it for decades basically because the Republicans are so much crazier and worse. And there was a breaking point. And it finally happened that when they come with their identity politics message that everybody knows conceals a Wall Street agenda, conceals a corporate agenda of what the Democrats are really going to do, conceals a war agenda, which is related to that corporate agenda, they said no. And, is Trump a nightmare? Yes, he's a nightmare. But this is because of the 40-year bankruptcy of the Democratic Party, which gave us people like Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi. Yeah, they're women, but they're nightmares who pursue terrible policies to enrich themselves and their cronies, to undermine civil liberties in the United States.
And that's across the board, until we get money out of politics. Is it ever going to be fair? Is it ever going to be fair as long as you can buy elections, you can buy votes, you can buy policy? The other countries that give every politician the same amount of money, that's it. They have true representation. Now everybody's bought. And so, again, we come back to where's the power? The power with us is with each other and locally. And it comes back to that to me.
Yeah, Fred, any thoughts? Any more thoughts?
Yeah, I would like to see us look to Denmark.
Denmark, that's it.
Denmark,
I forgot that.
I was there 2 years ago when they had the national elections. They have the campaigning for 10 days.
Oh, that would be so wonderful.
And they're on TV, and there's 9 parties.
Wow.
And they all debate, and the party with the plurality wins.
So sane.
And then the posters are all down the next day after the election, and it's all forgotten, and it's a 10-day process.
So it's a simple, if you get one more vote, that is, you're going to be the president, the prime minister?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
sane.
The reason I mentioned that, though, is I would just like to see more choices than just two parties.
Well,
yeah,
sure.
We have a Green Party and all these other smaller parties, but I'd like to see a third party that has some power.
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked to seen more people debate other than just the Democrats and Republicans.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Fred.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Fred.
much.
Thank you.
Get that Gammel dance going. Also a little Lean Yakovit. I'll be back through Marshall in a little while.
Okay, you're listening to Let's Talk Radio with co-hosts Charles Schultz, Paul Raffel, and I'm Mary Frank. Please do call us and share your views by calling 415-663-8492, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, and when you call, your phone will ring for a little while until I plug you into the system. Then you'll hear a weird little noise, and then I'll tell you you're on the air, and please give us your name. Turn down your radio. Please watch your language. Thank you very much. Keep it English.
Oh, gracious. That's the result of a Trump presidency. Keep it English. Do you see what's going on here? Victor Reyes, please call in and give us your opinion of that. Well, the one problem is these concentrations of power are so great that you really are not going to be able to get the power to change those things on a federal level. And so imagine that you could. So say Citizens United, which allows all this corporate money from all over the world to flow into our elections. Say you blocked them from putting these corporations or powerful interests from putting their money into campaigns in that way. Do you think that's going to stop them from using their power to influence campaigns? The problem is the concentration of power itself. So how you make this power more diffuse, how you decentralize power in a meaningful way becomes the real question. But there are things that can be done. Not a matter for despair, actually, a matter for a kind of new hope. But the thing that will be difficult about that is that we're going to have to have debates and conflicts and arguments and discussions here amongst our neighbors where most of the time we only hang out with people we know will agree with us. So I've seen this new little thing with the safety pin, that it means that it's safe to talk to me. I hate that. The last time I saw a safety pin was on a diaper. And I think it's childish and stupid. And saying this Hillary's failure is caused by living in an echo chamber, the safety pin people say, well, let's talk to even fewer people now with the exact same opinion as us, even more so, rather than who do we disagree with? Why?
Is that what the safety pin's about? I thought it was. I'm willing to give you a safe place if you're being abused.
Yes,
verbally.
and if you see racism, like on the bus, you sit next door to the person who's, being.
Being harassed.
Being harassed.
If you see racism in West Marin, how would anybody know? I would say I am slightly darker complected than Paul Raffel, and I felt the oppression of that over the years. No, it's absurd. But the thing is, we need to discuss difference, not what we share in common. There's too much of that. And it really, ultimately, there's no conversation at all. There's no discussion at all.
Well, that was the problem of this election. Everything became so polarized and so angry. Nobody was listening to anybody. Everybody was, at war, basically.
415-663-8492. Please call in if you're for the Electoral College. I'd like to hear the good side of it, because we're kind of lambasting it when we actually talk about it.
We can get off topic here. That's the whole point. We contain multitudes.
Well, I don't know. What are the good points of it? I don't understand what, you said you were kind of for it. Why? What is so great about it?
I guess from all I've read, I mean, I don't understand why it's there, other than that it was put in place by slave owners to make sure that the South had a say in early politics in early United States of America. But as I said, everything was based on slavery. They're all slave owners anyway, so the whole thing is based on that.
What do you think it's more?
Does it give a voice? Does it work as giving a voice to smaller states? And is that not a good thing? I don't know.
Yeah. But, I mean, Okay, but
you know, this
what do you
is,
have against the popular
it's
vote?
one of
Let's
the
put it
great
that way.
breadbaskets of the world,
Yeah.
and that's mostly in this, you know,
But
down
you
the
know,
valley
when times were better,
yeah.
there was not this kind of divide. You know, I think you see that as a result of tremendous stress economically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And
yeah.
you know that
Sure.
that has really influenced it more than anything, I think.
Well, and are we not seeing that it's those states that are being given sort of a more level playing field are expressing that, and why shouldn't they? And should they just one person, one vote? Should they just suffer the consequences of being run by urbanites? Even though we are run by urbanites.
663-8492. Give us a call here. The Slate in 2012 put out their 5 arguments in favor. Certainty of outcome, which means that you win a small majority, but you win a popular vote, but you win a large majority of the electoral vote. It gives you a stronger mandate as president. They go through some, I don't think, not very compelling further reasons why to have an electoral college. But I guess that would ultimately be somehow how do you unify the country around something? Because if you had it by popular vote, I mean, there'd be a very strong argument for the secession, right? All of these red states that are now completely red, states like California, well, the Inland Empire isn't blue. The Central Valley isn't blue, but the coast is overwhelmingly blue. So there's some kind of unifying factor to that. But whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know. But, you know, we've had stolen elections before. Probably we don't know about 2000 because...
Bush and Gore.
Yeah, the Supreme Court ordered their order effectively ended the Florida recount, so there never was a Florida recount. Gore didn't fight it. Much to our collective detriment. And in 1960, voter fraud in Illinois and Texas is thought to have given the election to Kennedy over Nixon. Of course, people in Marin think, oh, that's good, right? And also, we just don't have a memory of things like that. Now, that's a sort of widely accepted historical fact in American history about the election of 1960. This is not a crazy Republican conspiracy. When I learned it from a left Democrat in college, a million years ago, and I thought, oh, really? That happened? But we forget about those things.
When it suits us. Yeah.
When it suits us. Or never knew. Never knew the extent to which we don't have power in this country. And certainly not at the federal level, barely at the state level. Powerful interests within the state can make themselves felt in Sacramento. Vast majority of people cannot. They could make themselves felt at their local city councils, their boards of supervisors, et cetera. You can really, really move politicians on that level, mostly because you can freak them out. It isn't being their friend. It's letting them know that if they're going to dismiss the will of a large group of people who will consistently go to public meetings and demand what they want, that they're going to be voted out next time around. No kind of fear like that on the federal level. They just don't care. And it makes good sense. They're 3,000 miles away from us. Who here has ever met Jared Huffman? Or previously Lynn Woolsey? I know her chief of staff used to live out here, so maybe people saw Lynn once in a while, but we never see these people or know them.
Yes, please call us at 415-663-8492 and give us your thoughts on all of this.
Yes, pro and con. That's what we need. We need voices for the Electoral College, even though I still don't really understand it.
Okay.
December 28th, deadline for receipt of electoral votes. January 6th is when they actually count the electoral votes in Congress. It's all very...
And there's some discussion about maybe some will switch, but I don't think so. I think this is our
they're
president.
All the party faithful. That's how you get to be an elector, right?
Yeah. Well, there was discussion that maybe some people would switch, but what is it? He's got to get 37 people to switch, and that's not going to happen.
That's happened once, I think. One person... was a faithless elector, as they call it.
The thing is, would Hillary being elected have been a cause for celebration? Would that have been a good thing? I don't think so. And so is Trump a disaster, and certainly still a potential disaster, the dimensions of which we don't know? Yeah, certainly. But these are terrible choices. And I think people who genuinely don't care vote on the basis of identity politics, vote on the basis of image. The Clintons are no friends to the poor. But they are friends to rich people, and let's face it, most of the people in places like West Marin are quite wealthy. Certainly, even the servant class out here, which is quite large, do very well relative to people in the rest of the country. So I just neither of those candidacies were hope for anything. Maybe the one good thing might be that we are rid of the Clintons finally, although I'm sure they will try and find some way to.
But isn't it amazing that of all the people in this country, these are the two best we could come up with?
Oh, well, that
it
was
just mind-boggling.
That was by design, unfortunately.
Yeah, well,
yes,
people were telling the Clintons are saying, look, well, you saw it in the polls. Bernie would beat Trump, Hillary wouldn't.
Yeah.
And they just said, just because she wanted it. This is the resentment of the privilege, which abounds in places like...
And entitlement.
And entitlement in places like West Marin. Hillary Clinton was going to be president of the United States sheerly on the force of how much she wanted to be president of the United States, against all sort of advice or even just a rational awareness of what was happening in the country. The two presidents that won as Democrats since Clinton were both considered to be outsiders, whether they were or weren't ultimately. So this Southern governor in '92, who with his homespun style, he was not considered a D.C. insider. Then Barack Obama, a one-term senator from Illinois, nobody knew him. Look at the crazy name. He's black. Oh my God, he's an outsider, not an insider. People had a lot of hope about that, and were very excited about that. The people who lose are people like who are considered overwhelming to be insiders. So Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, who, by the way, here is a conspiracy theory. Amanda Eichstadt's father and John Kerry went to the same high school. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
There is a conspiracy here at KWMR.
My cousin went to business school with Donald Trump.
There you go.
He was a classmate.
Well, the plot thickens here. So Kerry, the ultimate insider from the moment of his birth. In fact, Gore is another great example of that. Gore Vidal made the comment about Al Gore saying his nickname at St. Albans, a private school in the D.C. area, was Ozymandias, as a reference to the Keats poem, The Sands of Empire. I am Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look upon my works,
you mighty.
And despair. So he said Al Gore just wanted to be president since his day was born. You could say similar things about somebody like John Kerry and Clinton, but they're considered insiders, and people don't like that. And it doesn't work. It loses elections.
How ironic that the insiders are all lining up to join the cabinet, of course. So they have to be insiders, otherwise nothing will get done in Washington.
By the way, did they figure out where the poor Japanese minister is going to go to meet with Trump today? Did you hear that story?
Oh, the prime minister is going to meet with him today?
You didn't hear that story?
No, go on.
He went public and said yesterday, I have no idea where this meeting is. We have no idea who our contact is. We've been given no telephone number, no nothing.
No. I know. He's not the president of the United States yet. He's just the president-elect.
He's not an insider. He doesn't know how to do these things.
Oh, my goodness.
So 4 times in U.S. history is when the Electoral College voted, 5 now, voted against the popular vote. Samuel Tilden, back in 1876, won 51% of the popular vote, but was 1 electoral vote short.
Rutherford B. Hayes, I think, won that election. I got a free
He
Coke.
did? Exactly. 5 points to you. 1888, Grover Cleveland won a plurality of the popular vote, 49%, but he lost the state of New York, and so it cost him. And apparently he had made some enemies in Tammany Hall, so they were not very sympathetic to him. 2000, of course, Al Gore. 1824 election. Andrew Jackson won a plurality of the popular vote and the electoral vote. However, since he didn't win a majority in the Electoral College, the vote went to the House of Representatives. Oh, that's what happens. Did you know that? The House of Representatives gets to choose the president in a tie. So how would this work with more than 2 parties?
It's called They Get You Coming and Going and Standing Still.
If you don't have a majority and there's 3 or 4 parties and they're all going to end up sort of similar, especially if 100 million people don't vote like they didn't this time.
Yeah.
they're all going to be about the same. Then what happens? It goes to the House of Representatives?
663-8492.
Good Lord.
I think the question you need to think about political power as being some kind of local activity you engage in, but then you have to make that activity be after a real purpose that's going to change the ways in which we live and function collectively.
I'd like to see us live like, have a political system like Denmark's.
Well, I guess, but, Europe's in a mess right now.
I know, but that sounds very fair to me.
But there are extreme right-wingers in Denmark, certainly in France. You might have the National Front win the election next year. There are a bunch of elections next year in Europe. I mean, Europe is always...
Well, look who won our election. But it's only lasting so many weeks. Everybody has the same amount of money.
Sure.
There's 9 points of view representative. That's healthy.
Well, you say everyone has the same amount of money. Again, these concentrations of wealth have their way of making themselves felt. So the person who's considered to have swung many elections in England over the last 4 decades is Rupert Murdoch, who owns newspapers and television stations, and he picks his winner and he pushes them in a big way. And before that, it was other press barons like Cecil
like the
King.
Koch brothers here.
In this case, I'm saying that's somebody who owns these newspapers. It's not money that the Conservative Party in England or then New Labour was giving to these newspapers to run stories about them. It was this press baron saying, I'm going to push this candidate, not that candidate.
But we have the same thing here.
Oh, and we have a call.
It's the same organization, actually.
Yep.
That's
the News Corp.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, caller. Hi, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hey, Paul, this is Marcel.
Marcel. Hi.
Hello, Marcel.
I couldn't call you last week. I'm too upset over Trump stealing the election, but I'm more on my feet now. So a couple of things I want to mention. First of all, Trump actually stole the Electoral College vote, and this is how he did it. I don't know if you've heard of Greg Pallas. He's a journalist for the Guardian in Britain and Rolling Stone magazine.
Sure.
Are you familiar with Greg Pallas?
Yes, I actually know him, yeah.
Okay, well, he was interviewed in KPFA several times, and he wrote this article for Rolling Stone, the September 8th issue of this year, a couple of months ago. And the title of the article was The GOP's Stealth War Against Voters. And subtitle, Will an anti-voter fraud program designed by one of Trump's advisors deny tens of thousands the right to vote in November? And this advisor, who is Chris Kobach, I think he's from Kansas or something, and Trump's just putting him on his team. Anyway, what they did was they totally suppressed the votes. They kept tens of thousands of voters, mainly blacks and Hispanics, from voting. They took them off the voting list. And Hillary Clinton, she must have known this, of course. They all know it. But they won't challenge anything because they're all part of the establishment. They don't care about the people. They just care about their power. And, if we knew it, the public knew this a couple of months ago. I mean, she could have, why would she concede? Because it's all arranged. Gore did the same thing. He wouldn't, he could have challenged it. And Clinton certainly could have challenged it, but they wouldn't do it because they want to keep the system going at any price. They don't care about the people. They just care about themselves.
Well, if you think back to 1960, what happened was Kennedy stole the election. They knew that the voter fraud in Illinois and Texas had swung it for Kennedy, and Nixon was very upset about it. But he essentially was told, if you dispute it, that's the end of your political career. And then 8 years later, he became the president. And I guarantee you that played into Al Gore's thinking about not challenging in 2000.
Exactly. Yeah, you're ahead of me. Yeah. And one quick other thing I want to mention: there's a campaign. National Popular Vote campaign, and already I think 11 states have signed on to it, including California. And so it totals like 165 electoral votes. And basically, what it provides is that the state will give all his electoral votes to the candidate who wins the popular vote. And so far, there's 165. There's 11 states to sign on, and it totals 165 electoral votes. So this has been in progress since 2009. So I thought you guys know about it, but you didn't. But anyway, you can't know everything.
Well, I think the problem with that, think about what would happen there. So you have people voting for Trump who feel that they've been basically disenfranchised for 2 generations.
Right.
And then you'd have some movement led by California and New York that would then swing the election in an unprecedented move in favor of Hillary Clinton. I mean, do we want to have a civil war in this country?
Well, that's why they won't do anything. You're right. But yeah, they don't want it. But they, as they say, if they stood up before, when they knew the voters, they removed a load of voting places, all in the swing states. So a lot of people just couldn't vote. They couldn't get to the voting places. And then they removed a bunch of people, tens of thousands of people who, Hispanic names and black names. They said they were voting in 2 states because there's a similar name. It's all a fraud. So when you guys get a chance, just look up the September 8th edition of Rolling Stone and read that article, Greg Palast. You might discuss it next week. That'll be interesting.
You can see Greg Palast was just today, I think, on The Real News. You can see him interviewed on therealnews.com. And, there's some other outlets, more recent than September, he's been telling his story. It's a documentary, actually, that he made that was screened during prime time on German television, and, of course, almost nobody in the United States has heard about.
Good.
Hey, okay, great talking to you.
Thank you so much, Marcel.
Thank you. I'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marcel.
And speaking of next week, we shall not be here next week.
Really? Oh, that's right. Charles Hour is on.
It'll be Charles week.
24 hours of Charles.
That's right. I've offered to do that for fundraising before, and to speak extemporaneously for my earliest memories in an unbroken present till today.
I heard there was going to be a special. I didn't know it was that special.
I think that is the special. Yeah. Lyons insisted. I said, it would seem vain, but G said, no, you have to do it for the good of the people.
Anyway, yeah, next week is Thanksgiving, of course, and we shan't be here, so happy Thanksgiving to everybody. This has been, what am I doing? Who am I again? I'm Robin, that's right. Yeah, and Robin, get well soon. We hope you're doing okay today.
But we want to thank all our listeners and our callers today for your participation. We truly appreciate it. And I hope you'll tune in every Thursday at 11 because your voice really does matter.
And KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of these hosts here and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. So next week we shan't be discussing anything.
No, it'll be about a Thanksgiving show.
And so this has been Let's Talk. Thank you, everyone, for listening and for calling in. Bye for now.